In this week's video, we have another special on workflow efficiency, and this time we're dealing with templates. So last week was all about presets. This week is going to be on templates, and hopefully you'll start to see that there's a value in these things. Maybe not everything I'm showing you, but maybe in something that's going to help you become just a little bit more efficient. So we're going to start by talking about the what and the how. What are templates? How do you set them up? What are some things that you can do that's going to suit you and your style of music? And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about the why and the philosophy. And like a lot of my videos, this is just going to be me kind of blabbing at you. So if you don't like being blabbed at, definitely go ahead and just turn the video off now, because that's what it's going to be. I'm not going to be showing you any really cool techniques or anything like that. But as I said in the last video, the concept is really simple. It's a very easy concept, but it's designed more for experienced producers and experienced artists who already kind of know the sounds that they like and that they pull to all the time, and maybe know what's going on in their genre of music and already have an idea of like what sounds and things are going to work. So really a template is just a way of making it so that you don't have to constantly be going over here and dragging and dropping. You already have things set up and good to go. Inside of Bitwig Studio, you can save anything as a template. So any project at any stage, you could go in and save as a template. You have some different categories and other metadata you can put in there. And then to load up a template, you go here, you click on the little icon, go to My Templates. And then if you're curious about where these exist on your computer, you'll go into Open File, Bitwig Studio, Library, Templates, where you can then, copy and paste, save whatever you need to do to share with friends or whomever. So we're going to look at two examples of templates, and please don't look at my screen as an example of what you should be doing. I have switched systems relatively recently, and I do not have anything set up and good to go. Mine is really badly organized and not at all what I would be encouraging young producers or experienced producers to do. I'm not really doing a lot of music production stuff anymore these days. But in a year and a half, 2 years, you'll probably see that the stuff I'm telling you, if you then came and looked at my workstation, it would be very similar to, what I'm preaching. So I do try to practice what I preach. Anyway, we're going to look at a production example, and then we're going to look at a mixing example. With production, let's say that all you do is trap music. Your template is probably going to be a trap template, meaning that you have the drum sounds that you really like in your genre, you have the bass sounds, you have your effects, whatever. That's all going to be loaded up. If you do both trap and, regular pop music, you're probably going to have two different templates, one for your pop, one for your trap. And unfortunately, with the way the preset things work, we'll talk about this when I open up the first one here, it can be a little bit dicey in terms of being able to keep things super organized, but I'll tell you the way that I would go about doing it. So anyway, let's start by looking at the production one. And I have this one, it just says start writing. That's the description, which is meaning that I just have all my sounds ready to go and I can start sketching something out. And then once that gets sketched out, I can change the sounds, add different things, bring in VSTs, whatever. In both of these examples, we are just using built-in stock Bitwig stuff, but you can have a lot more. If you have presets inside of VSTs or chains, you can have those loaded up into your template and ready to go. So let's just go ahead and click open. I'm already blabbing way too much, and we'll see what gets brought up. So you can see that I even have it come up with the clips, and we'll talk about that when we reach the drums. So we have our master out, and we have a few, Bitwig calls them effects tracks, return tracks, same difference. If I go onto the master here, we're going to see that I have a peak limiter and I have a tool. And what's happening here, and the reason I have it set up like this, is that the limiter is going to catch anything that crosses our hard wall 0 and gets into digital clipping, but our meter's not going to go red, or it won't always go red, even with these settings here with the ceiling at 0. So for that reason, I have a tool after the peak limiter going up by 0.1. We could bring it up to 0.2, but that is then going to tell me if I'm, making my music and I see this going red, that something needs to be changed. Some kind of mixing thing needs to be changed to make sure that that's not an issue. So that's just something that I usually will set up on the master for myself so that I can keep appropriate gains and not get into that risky game of bringing down the master or doing some really funky stuff, just a gain staging thing for myself. Followed by a Mixverb here, which is just going to be a generic 100% size room. Basically, we're at our regular settings. The thing I would potentially play around with is diffusion, and that's something I might change a little bit later on, diffusion and build up. And then inside here, I have a filter that's just filtering out some of the low end. And then for anything that is really low, being brought into the reverb below about 120 hertz. Of course, that's a gentle roll off. That's being brought into mono. So these are just things that I already have set up and good to go because I do it every single time. Okay, so we have our Mixverb. We now have a dual delay, and you can see the way that this one has been brought in. I can mostly work with the remote controls, but if I need to, you'll see that the high cut, low cut filters, those I don't have control over here, and I don't have that detune and rate. And the reason why this is called dual delay tape is because we do have that detuning that occurs inside of the delay too. Then we have a ping pong delay, which is going to be a delay 4, but I don't need to see the delay 4. Okay, this is all I need to see. This is my ping and my pong. I can change the offset timing. I can change how this is, up to a whole note in 16th notes. Then I have a feedback control, and then I have my filters. That's all I need. I don't need to mess with anything else, okay? And then I also have a slapback, which is just a delay 1. Okay, I don't think it's in mono technically. So if something comes in there in stereo, I do believe it's delayed in stereo. So we might consider at some point monoing this out, but this is fine for me for now. And again, I can change the timing, the feedback, the offset. Lovely. Okay. So now let's actually move into the instrument portion of this, where at the top I have drums. And you can see that by default on the group, I do have a compressor on here. It is off, but I can turn that on if I want to, and I can get in there and work with those settings. I don't believe on anything else. Yeah, there's nothing else on any of the buses. When we open up the drums, all I have is one simple drum machine. And what we have here is very basic. So we have a kick. Oop, got to go down one more octave. We have a kick, snare, clap, up to the cymbals. Okay, and a little bit of choking is going on in there as well. Now, for you and your genre of music, you might have more things in this drum machine, but my goal is to keep this really simple and straightforward. That is the point, okay? Very simple. I don't have any percussion. The other thing that you would consider doing from the beginning is taking advantage of the clips, and you might have 20 potentially, I wouldn't say more than 20, but maybe 20 generic beats that you like the sound of, that's synced up appropriately, that's, triggering on the right notes for whatever drum machine you set up. And then that's your starting point, right? And of course, all these things are going to be working together with you as you're changing the tempo. The other option, the alternative to doing that, is to have and take advantage of your clips. So you could use things in here, or you could kind of save your clips in this area. What I was talking about before, what I'd really love to be able to do with the collections is to put collections inside of collections. And I don't believe it's possible to do that as of now, because what I would like is to have one for any genre of music that I'm working on or work on a lot. So I'd have a pop, which I would double click, and then I would see collections for drums, for bass, for leads, for pads, whatever, right? I'd have all of those there, and I could just access them inside of a folder. The fact that we can't do that means that if I was doing this here under drums, how this says starter drums 1, I would probably give it a genre. So since this is at 128, and since I did the work before this in like 128, I would probably call this like house drums 1, or I would put the BPM somewhere inside of the namesake, so that if I was working with trap or making a trap beat, one session, and then was working on a house beat in another session, I wouldn't be getting confused. Okay, so make sure you think about your naming if you are going to use a strategy like this. But in this case, we just have this first pattern that we can bring in. We can drag and drop this like so. We can go ahead and just stretch that out over 8 bars. Let's loop it. Let's listen to it. Okay, it's not that exciting. And then if I want to get into the drums here, I could send some of this into our Mixverb. Okay, just to get started. And again, what I would prefer more likely would be to be going in here and just kind of listening to them at the start. And later on, I can go in, I can change sounds, whatever. Remember that once you load up a template, it's just calling it a new project. So once we save this, we're not going to be overwriting the template or anything like that. So that's another positive. If you're working in, again, let's say a genre like trap or whatever, you might break this out differently. So you might have main drums, you might have 808s, you might have just hats, and then have different patterns that you can kind of patch and bring together. And these are all things that you are personally fond of, right? So this isn't super generic. These are sort of patterns that you've made or things that you know that work, that maybe when you've been making music from scratch, you find that you just keep doing the same things again and again. And that's why we have a template. That's really the reason for it. So now we have our drum set, all right? We can go ahead and turn record off of that, bring that down. Maybe we'll turn on the compressor since I have it here. All right. And we're in business there. All right, moving on to the bass. We see that we have two different options. We have a pluck bass. Yeah, it just needs to be brought down. And there's some sustain on it, but I would normally use that as a pluck bass. And then we have a generic sustain bass. Which maybe I'd use one of them, maybe I'd use both of them, but just from a writing standpoint of getting started, these are kind of the two types of basses that I would use for a genre like this, and they should work just fine. Now, I don't have any clips here saved, so what we're going to do is just go into everything, and I'm just going to search for bass line. Let's see if we have something. Let's see if this is actually a bass line. I don't know what this is. These are very lame. Let's try this. This is also very lame, but let's just go ahead and use it for the sake of it. All right. And then we can actually probably figure out what the pattern is. G, so we're probably, G major? Now I'm just turning on this diatonic transposer to help me moving forward. Yeah. Okay, that works for me. But again, my recommendation, and I keep saying that, it's I don't want to make it sound like you have to do something like this, but my recommendation would be that for both the drums and for bass, you do already have a large number of clips ready to go to kind of audition and paste and bring in, and then you can go further and obviously edit stuff and change it. But this is fine as it exists now. And maybe we'll do a little bit of send into one of these delays. I don't like that. Let's try it into the ping pong. The slap back might work the best. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so now we have our drums, we have our bass done. Now we can go into the leads. Okay, that's next. And you see I have a plucky lead and a sustain lead, so it's following that same logic. And I think we said that we want G major. Okay. Okay. So let's start listening and maybe playing something. Okay, and it wouldn't take us long to come up with something. Okay, and then let's just take what we got on the second half of that and see if it's any good. Okay. And then we can go in here and we can quantize this if we want to. And obviously this is me working at just at as fast a speed as I possibly can here. I'll bring the humanize way down. Okay. Trying to find some setting. Let's see if we can get something. Let's listen to what this sustained lead sounds like. And let's turn on the transposer. Yeah, and I mean, we could definitely come up with something there with the lead on top of it. I don't want to just waste a lot of time here, but let's just come up with something. Let's do that again. Oops, sorry, didn't get this all set up. Okay. Okay, that's fine. And I'm not sure if this is a pad sound that would actually work. Needs more movement. Okay, but in just that short amount of time, we already have something that we can work with, and we're able to do that pretty quickly. Right? Okay, so it's something. And then we could go in here, save this as a work in progress, and obviously we're gonna add more elements to it and do more stuff with it, but it's just gotten us going. So that would be an example of more of a production type template. Again, I think the thing that I would stress is just that you get smart about saving clips and kind of going through and finding things that you have in your library that you know are going to work well for your genre of music. Okay. And if you don't have anything, then it's time for you to maybe make some yourself and then save them and obviously put them into these collections. Okay. So that is our production template example. Next, we're going to look at a mixing template example. So now we're going to look at a stem mix template. And in this case, it's very generic because we're only using Bitwig devices. Most of you that are doing stem mixing are probably using more than just Bitwig devices. And of course, you can save those in your template. And you can have everything turned off and then just choose what you want to turn on or off. So let's just open it up so that we can look at it and talk about it. And then I'll talk about how you might incorporate plugins or other presets. Okay, so this one's been opened up. And normally, as you can see by default, I have it going to the browser and to the presets. Why I have it searched under gain, I don't know, but you'd probably go in here and you would have all of your different specific mixing presets ready to go, whether it's EQ or compression or whatever. This is where I would probably grab it from. And again, I'd love to be able to put folders inside of folders here because I don't really want to be able to see my instrument ones if I'm also a producer. I'd want to just have mix specific things available to me. And again, you can save things in more than one location. So in theory, you could do that. You could make a mixing one, but there'd probably be lots of things that'd be confusing. There'd be EQ, there'd be compression, limiting, whatever. Okay, so this is our mixing one, and it looks really, really basic. Oh, I should have showed you this too. On the other one, there are some things that I've actually changed in terms of what's visible and not visible in the mixing panel as well, but that's besides the point. So anyway, that's something that I probably will share this one if you want to look at it and mess around with it. But what we have here is our mixing template, and it's designed for stems. And what you're going to see is that a lot of the legwork has already been done for you, whether people have named their stems appropriately or not. So let's go back and let's start on the master. And most things you're going to see here are off by default. But what we have here is our clip identifier on by default. And this just features that same peak limiter tool thing that we looked at before. So it's just telling me initially when I'm setting levels and I'm setting my mix balance, am I clipping on the master? And if so, I can make the appropriate adjustments on the individual tracks or on the individual buses. Okay, so that is number one. Number two is once I get a little bit deeper into the mix and I've set my gain staging, I have a very quick and easy master bus chain here that features an EQ, a bus compressor, width, it's a multi-band, I believe, and then also something to just make it louder, which is the peak limiter. So as I'm going through and I'm listening, if I want to turn on the bus compressor at any point, I can turn that on, I can edit it, I can close it back down. Once I get to the master bus stage, I'd probably be turning the clip identifier off. Just as an FYI, if you are working with this, go in. I've preset certain things. I've preset certain bands around where I would normally maybe have some band stuff happening on the master bus. We have our width here. That's just going to be setting up, if I want to add some extra width to the highs, I can do that by default just by turning this on. And it will turn those two tool devices on as well. And then last but not least, we have a peak limiter if we want to work with that. So that's what's happening here on the master bus. By default, it's turned off. We have the exact same things we set up before. We have a Mixverb, we have our tape delay, a ping pong delay, a slapback delay. You might have other things here, but this is just what I have from the beginning. And then where it gets really crazy is that we have our different buses here. And inside of each of these buses, there are a bunch of tracks, which hopefully would facilitate all the tracks that you might get in a stems. if you get a big folder and it has 80 tracks, hopefully there's going to be room for everything here. So the first thing I would do is I would drag and bring in all my vocals, and hopefully everything was labeled correctly. Let's say we had a lead vocal and a background vocal and these things. I could take all of them and I could drag them and I could put them onto the different tracks like so, or just drag all my vocals in and then just move the stuff around to put it where it needs to go. Okay, so that's the idea there. Now, on each of these tracks, we have a variety of different things. And this is where you start to see the value of the template, because if you are somebody that works with a lot of plugins and you always use the same plugins on your vocal bus, or you always tend to use the same compressor on your lead vocal, why not just have that in there ready to go so that you can just bring it up and you can adjust the settings? And if it doesn't work, then yeah, of course, go back and grab something different and try something different. But this is just to make you more efficient. Less time clicking around, more time listening. So on the vocal bus here, in this case, all we have is a compressor if we want a bus compressor. On our lead vocal, on all of these, we have different channel strips. Okay, so here on the vocal bus, we have a channel strip. We can turn that channel strip on at any time. We can add our low and high pass filters. We have a mix EQ that we can bring in. And again, everything is turned off by default. That's the way I would like to work. Have it all turned off by default. If I need a shelf, boom, I got my shelf. If I need a bell, boom, I've got my bell. And then I have my dynamics brought on here at the end if I want to do any kind of compression or expansion or a combination of the two. And this is a chain and a channel strip that you're going to see time and time again on most of these things. And the point isn't to say that you're not going to use additional effects. The point is just, this is a starting point. These are the most commonly used things. And some of these change depending on the category that we're in. And then last but not least, I don't know how well you can see this. This is a different color here. And this is a send that's unique to, or a return, I should say, unique to the vocal bus. So that, let's say that we are doing and we're setting our levels and stuff from over here. I have a unique knob that's just going into that unique vocal reverb, which is different settings. That would be the reverb I'd always want to use on my vocal. Maybe it's a plate, maybe it's a really smooth hall. That's totally up to you, right? But this is the way that I have that set up. And then if I want to send the reverb from that vocal into one of our made verbs, we can do that from here. But that's, again, just a way to keep things a little bit more organized and easy for me when I'm working in any one of these groups. So coming back over in our drum bus, you can see this one has both a limiter and a compressor. So if we want to do a little bit of limiting of the peaks of the whole thing, we can do that before jumping into the compressor. And then with these ones, we have a little bit of a different channel strip where we've also added in the transient designer on all of these different hits. And once you've dragged and dropped everything from that category, you can rename if you need to, and then delete the ones you're not using. So maybe this track didn't even have vocals. I could just go in, delete the whole bus. Or maybe it just had a lead vocal part. I can delete everything else or rename it if I want to. That's the idea behind this, is that you're mostly deleting, you're not having to add. But you can, of course, duplicate any of these tracks as well. On the bass, you can see we have filters. We have, I call this saturate. This is just the amp device and very generic default settings on the bus, and then I have the dynamics there as well. So I've added the dynamics here, not the compressor. Not entirely sure why. Probably because I would personally just like to use a really soft knee kind of compressor. So I think that was probably the reason I went with that. Again, personal preference. We then move on to the leads, and on the leads, all I have is a compressor, and we look at this chain. Not any different to the chain that was on the vocals. We have our harmony bus. What's on this? Interesting. So on the harmony bus, I have a compressor, then I have a multi-band effects. And this is probably to try and potentially, if I wanted to, I could go in and I could change the width. The only reason I have this set up is that on the harmony bus and on keys and strings and these things, a lot of times I do multi-band effects processing on that bus. And I do mid-side processing on those buses. That's why it's set up here. Again, just personal preference, a little bit different for me. I think we just have our generic channel strip there. And then we have our effects bus, which if you notice with the effects bus, there's nothing in this chain. We are just able to do a gain staging. That's the only reason that chain exists. Same thing is going to be true on the miscellaneous or textures bus. This is just for things that don't fit into any of the other categories. okay, from your stems. That's where they would go. That's usually how I work. All right, so that is pretty much all there is to this mixing template. The way that you might take this further is, let's say that you have a plugin like the Brainworks, I think it's called like Console N, and it has that kind of technology where it tries to emulate some of the subtle differences from channel to channel on the mixing console. You can set that up in here and have that already good to go. And I think there's even a randomize button. So after you delete all the tracks you don't need, you can randomize all the channels on it, and you're ready to start, and you can work with it without having to drag and drop it in a million different times. All right, that might be one option. You might always use a tape plugin on everything. You can have that set up here, good for you to go. You could have your tape on all of the different buses. And I think really the more obvious thing is that the compressor or the EQ that you might be using on your lead vocal is going to be different to maybe the compressor or the EQ that you might use on your drum bus. Or you might have a special exciter plugin that you always use on your synths. At least I that's one thing I do. I have a couple of different exciters that I usually use on the harmony bus and on the leads bus, things of that nature. And those are all things that you can build into the template to make your life easier. So that is the mixing template, done and dusted. Again, be thinking about how you could combine this with what we talked about in the presets video before. So for mixing, you might have a particular chorus preset that you like to use on particular instruments. You could even have that built into the template or have it over here so you can drag and drop it on much quicker. That's really the goal. We've come to the final section of this week's video, and if you've made it this far, congratulations. You've made it much further than I probably would have. And what we're going to be talking about is just the why. Why do we use templates as music producers, or why do we not use templates? First and foremost, it is very much a personal decision and a workflow thing. If you love working from scratch, and that for you is just the best way to do it, then by all means, that's what you should do. I think music production and cooking, they share like a lot of similarities in that if you look in a professional kitchen, they're doing prep work all day to get ready for service. And service sometimes might only be 20% of their workday. That might just be that 3-hour period where that's where customers are coming in. But they've done so much work beforehand, where yes, you still have to be focused. Yes, you're still involved, but it's just different. And I think music production a lot of times is the same way. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning. I might have 2 or 3 hours in me a day where I can really actually focus on the creation and the producing of music. The rest of the day, I just can't. My brain just is not capable of working at that kind of level with that kind of focus for more than that amount of time. But I could still be in the DAW. I could still be fiddling around. I could still be going through different presets or designing sounds or listening to samples, all that. And that's the time to do it. That's the time to really start organizing. There's a lot of time that you can spend organizing, creating templates and things like that, so that when the lights come on and creatively your juices are flowing, you're ready to jump in and get to it. And that's where templates are so valuable. That's where it really does make your workflow so much more efficient. Because I've seen a lot of producers, both amateur and professional, where they're scanning through sounds for 20, 25 minutes when it's supposed to be producing time. And that's the danger of it all, because now suddenly you've wasted a huge chunk of time that you can't get back. And like you start to lose that creative itch, you start to lose the creativity impulse, and it can really go downhill and it can spiral. And that might be it for the day. Very common. There's nothing wrong with it. You shouldn't beat yourself up for it. That's just how it goes. And that's the reason why I encourage people to make templates, to sort out clips, to sort out presets, to listen to all their samples and just grab the ones that you know work. Most music producers, many music producers, the prolific ones, they're working with really just a bank of like 20 drum sounds, 20 kick sounds, 20 snares, 20 claps, 20 hats, especially in genre. And they just reuse those again and again and again. They might process them differently. They might send them into different effects. The balancing of it all might be different, but it's mostly just those sounds. And the same thing can be said about, your synthesizer sounds, or if there's a particular like sample library, it goes hand in hand. Okay. And I think that's the point that I really want to stress to you guys is that, don't think templates are cheating. Don't think presets are cheating. Don't think samples are cheating. None of it is. It's about how you use it in that creative mode, in that creative time. And if you're more of a mix engineer, somebody more fascinated by mixing music, which is a very challenging thing, probably just as challenging as producing at a high level. Again, you want to be able to spend more time focused on listening and less time clicking through. So once you know that there's an EQ that you really love on vocals, instead of dragging through and looking through your plugin collection, you should have it saved as a preset of vocal EQ or vocal chain that you already know you like, that you can drag and drop on. And maybe you get lucky and it works 7 out of 10 times. Of course, the settings are going to be different every single time you use it. I'm not saying that just set it and forget it. You should still go in there and make sure it all is sounding and working correctly. And if it's not, you can then start to experiment and then you can get in and grab different things or whatever. But it's amazing to me how many people I see mixing again where they don't have anything on the channel already, and yet they're going to low pass and high pass filters every time, and they're bringing it in every single time. And it's like, that's a lot of time wasted, over a whole career of doing mixing music. And that's the beauty of the DAW and the beauty of working with these programs is that they're making it easier for you so that you can spend more time on what really matters, which is the overall sound, the final product, if you will. Now, full disclosure, since I've switched over systems, I've been working from scratch on the 3 or 4 projects that I've completed. I've always just come in here like this. I've had to go through, find what I've wanted to do. And it's very frustrating because in the past, I did use more of a template and a preset system that worked very well for me. And that might work well for you. It might not. But hopefully within these 2 videos, you found something that will make your workflow just a little bit more efficient. So if you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments. I'll try to get back to you. But yeah, otherwise, just enjoy the process. Understand that it's okay to spend a whole day just going through your samples or just listening to presets, but make sure the goal of that is that you're saving a few of them. You're saving a few things into your library, things that you want to come back to, things that inspire you, that then when you go in and you're in the creative zone, you already have those things ready to go for you. Okay. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say on the topic because I've been talking for way too long. Hopefully you learned something new. And I hope if you're watching this video on Friday that you have a fantastic weekend. Alrighty, take care.